The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval training facility as Sarah Martinez adjusted her gear bag on her shoulder. She had arrived at the base early, hopping to get familiar with the layout before the official orientation began. The crisp ocean breeze carried the sound of distant commands and the rhythmic pounding of boots on pavement. Sarah looked like any other new recruit reporting for duty. Her uniform was pressed, her boots polished, and her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. At 26, she had an athletic build that suggested fitness, but nothing about her appearance screamed special forces. She preferred it that way. As she walked toward the administration building, Sarah noticed a group of cadets gathered near the obstacle course. They were older than the typical new recruits, probably second or third-year trainees. Their confident postures and easy laughter marked them as the kind of group that had already established their place in the hierarchy. "Look what we have here," called out Jake Morrison, a tall cadet with broad shoulders and a cocky grin. He had been at the facility for 2 years and considered himself one of the top performers in his class. Fresh meat reporting for duty. His companions chuckled as they sized up Sarah. There was Marcus Chen, a former college football player who prided himself on his strength. Beside him stood Tony Rodriguez, quick-witted and always ready with a cutting remark. The trio had developed a reputation for hazing new arrivals, especially those they deemed unworthy of the naval uniform. Sarah heard the comment but continued walking, her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that the best response to provocateurs was often no response at all. Her military training had taught her to pick her battles wisely. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Jake called out, his voice carrying a note of irritation at being ignored. He jogged to catch up with Sarah, his friends falling in behind him. "Didn't they teach you respect in whatever small-town recruiting office you crawled out of?" Sarah stopped and turned to face them, her dark eyes calm and steady. "Good morning," she said simply, her voice carrying a slight Texas drawl. "I'm Sarah Martinez. I'm reporting for orientation today." The 3 cadets exchanged glances, surprised by her composure. Most new recruits either cowered or tried to prove themselves when confronted by upperclassmen. Sarah did neither. "Well, well," Marcus said, crossing his arms over his chest. "Sarah Martinez, let me guess you scored high on some written test and think that means you can cut it in the real Navy." "The Navy takes all kinds, I suppose," Tony added with a smirk. "But this isn't high school, sweetheart. This is where they separate the wannabes from the warriors." Sarah listened to their comments without visible reaction. She had heard variations of this speech countless times in her military career. The assumption that her gender or appearance made her weak was nothing new. What these cadets didn't know was that Sarah Martinez had already proven herself in ways they couldn't imagine. For the past 8 years, Sarah had been a member of one of the most elite special operations units in the military. She had completed missions in 3 different theaters of operation, earned commendations for valor under fire, and trained alongside some of the most skilled operators in the world. Her decision to transfer to this naval facility was part of a larger career move, but her records were classified at a level these cadets would never see. "I appreciate the welcome," Sarah said, her tone remaining even. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to find the administration office." Jake stepped closer, clearly not ready to let her go. "Hold on there, Martinez. See, we have a tradition here. New recruits need to prove they belong before they start strutting around like they own the place." "What kind of tradition?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew where this was heading. "A little friendly competition," Marcus said, gesturing toward the obstacle course. "Nothing too serious, just a chance for you to show us what you're made of." Sarah glanced at the obstacle course. It was a standard military setup: rope climbs, wall traversals, tire runs, and various other challenges designed to test physical fitness and mental toughness. She could complete it in her sleep, but she also recognized that accepting the challenge would likely lead to more harassment down the line. "That's very generous of you to offer," she said, "but I think I'll wait for the official physical assessments." "Oh, come on," Tony said, his voice taking on a mocking tone. "What's the matter? Afraid you might break a nail?" The comment drew laughter from a few other cadets who had started to gather, attracted by the confrontation. Sarah noticed that word was spreading, and more students were drifting over to watch the show. "I'm not afraid," Sarah replied calmly. "I just don't see the point in an unofficial competition." "The point," Jake said, stepping even closer, "is that this facility has standards. We can't have people here who aren't up to the challenge. Consider it a public service. Sarah studied the three cadets for a moment. She recognized the type, confident in their own abilities, but untested against real adversity. They had probably never faced an opponent who could truly challenge them, and their swagger came from beating up on people they perceived as weaker. "All right," she said finally. "If it's that important to you, I'll run your course." The gathering crowd murmured with anticipation. Some of the newer recruits looked nervous, clearly identifying with Sarah's position. The older cadets seemed excited at the prospect of watching another newcomer get put in their place. Jake grinned widely. "Excellent, just so it's fair, we'll give you a handicap. You can take 10 seconds off our time." "That's very considerate," Sarah said, "but I don't think that will be necessary." "Your funeral," Marcus said with a laugh. "Jake holds the course record at 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Think you can beat that, Martinez?" Sarah looked at the course again, mentally calculating the optimal path through each obstacle. 4 minutes and 37 seconds was respectable for a cadet, but well within her capabilities to beat significantly. "We'll see," she said simply. The crowd was growing larger now, with cadets abandoning their morning activities to watch the spectacle. Word had spread through the facility's informal communication network that there was about to be a show. Tony pulled out his phone to time the run. "Whenever you're ready, Princess, take your time stretching, you're going to need it." Sarah removed her jacket and handed it to a nearby cadet, revealing the lean muscle definition in her arms and shoulders. A few observant onlookers noticed the subtle signs of serious athletic conditioning, but most were too caught up in the drama to pay attention to details. She approached the starting line of the obstacle course and took a moment to center herself. The familiar pre-mission calm settled over her as she prepared to move. This wasn't a life-or-death situation like the operations she was used to, but the mental preparation was the same. "Begin whenever you want," Jake called out, his confidence unshaken. "We've got all day to watch you struggle." Sarah took a deep breath and exploded forward with a speed that caught everyone off guard. Her first obstacle was a series of low barriers that most people hurdled or stepped over. Sarah flowed over them like water, her movements smooth and efficient. The crowd's chatter died down as they watched her navigate the tire run. Instead of the high-knees approach most cadets used, Sarah moved with a flowing rhythm that looked almost effortless. Her feet found the centers of each tire with precision, never wasting a step or losing momentum. "She's fast," someone in the crowd murmured, but Jake waved dismissively. "Speed on the easy parts doesn't mean anything. Wait until she hits the rope climb." The rope climb was often the breaking point for many cadets. It required upper body strength, technique, and mental toughness as burning muscles demanded surrender. Sarah approached the 30-foot rope without hesitation. What happened next left the crowd stunned. Sarah didn't struggle or grunt her way up the rope like most cadets. Instead, she seemed to glide upward, her movements economical and controlled. She reached the top, rang the bell, and descended with the same fluid grace. Tony stared at his phone's stopwatch, hardly believing what he was seeing. 2 minutes, 15 seconds so far, he announced, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. Sarah was now approaching the wall traverse, a section that required upper body strength and problem-solving skills. Most cadets had to attempt it multiple times before finding the right technique. Sarah studied the wall for perhaps 3 seconds before beginning her crossing. Her movement across the wall was like watching a spider navigate its web. She found handholds and footholds that others missed, her body positioning optimal for efficient movement. She completed the traverse in less than 30 seconds and dropped to the ground without showing any signs of fatigue. The final section included a crawl under barbed wire, followed by a sprint to the finish line. Sarah low-crawled with military precision, her body perfectly flat as she moved beneath the obstacles. When she emerged, her uniform was barely dirty, and she transitioned immediately into a sprint that would have impressed a track coach. She crossed the finish line and stood up, breathing normally as if she had just taken a casual walk. The crowd was completely silent, processing what they had just witnessed. Tony looked at his phone again, then at Jake and Marcus. 3 minutes, 51 seconds, he announced quietly. The silence stretched for several more seconds before someone in the crowd started clapping. Others joined in, creating a genuine round of applause that acknowledged an exceptional performance. Jake's mouth was hanging open slightly. He had run the course dozens of times and knew how difficult it was to break 4 minutes, let alone do it while making it look easy. That was impressive, Marcus admitted grudgingly. Where did you train before coming here? Sarah retrieved her jacket and put it back on. Various places, she said vaguely. Thank you for the warm welcome. I should probably get to that orientation now. As she walked away, the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with conversation about what they had just seen. The 3 cadets who had initiated the challenge stood watching her go, their worldview slightly shaken. There's something different about her, Tony said quietly. That wasn't just good fitness, that was professional-level technique. Jake nodded slowly, his earlier arrogance replaced by curiosity. Yeah, the question is, what kind of professional? Unknown to them, several facility instructors had also witnessed Sarah's performance from the windows of nearby buildings. Chief Petty Officer Williams, a 20-year veteran with multiple deployments, had watched the entire display with growing interest. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Commander Harris, it's Williams. I think you need to take a look at the new transfer student, Sarah Martinez. Yes, sir. I think there might be more to her file than we were told. As Sarah finally made her way to the administration building, she reflected on the morning's events. She had hoped to keep a low profile during her transition, but that plan was clearly not going to work. Her performance on the obstacle course had been deliberately restrained. She could have completed it significantly faster, but even holding back, she had revealed more of her capabilities than she intended. The next few weeks were going to be interesting. She had a job to do at this facility, and her cover story as a simple transfer student was already showing cracks. But Sarah had operated under far more challenging circumstances than dealing with curious cadets and observant instructors. She reached the administration building and paused at the entrance, looking back toward the training areas where groups of students were still discussing the morning's unexpected entertainment. In a few hours, everyone at the facility would know about the new recruit who had made the course record look easy. Sarah Martinez had spent years keeping her true identity and capabilities hidden when necessary. But sometimes, she reflected, the best way to hide was in plain sight. If people thought they knew who she was based on one impressive physical performance, they might stop looking deeper. She pushed open the door and stepped inside to begin the next phase of her mission. The real challenge wouldn't be completing obstacle courses or impressing cadets. The real challenge would be accomplishing her objectives while maintaining her cover in an environment where nothing stayed secret for long. The morning sun was now fully up, promising a beautiful day. As Sarah approached the reception desk to check in for orientation, she allowed herself a small smile. She had missed the adrenaline rush of operating in uncertain terrain, even if this particular terrain came with significantly less danger than she was accustomed to. Behind her, through the building's windows, the training facility continued its daily routine. But something had changed in the dynamic, a shift that would ripple through the weeks to come. The cadets who had tried to intimidate the new recruit now found themselves questioning their own capabilities and wondering who exactly they had tried to challenge. Sarah Martinez was exactly where she needed to be, and her mission was just beginning. News of Sarah's obstacle course performance spread through the facility faster than wildfire. By lunchtime, every cadet, instructor, and staff member had heard some version of the story. The details grew more impressive with each retelling, though the basic facts remained the same. The new recruit had demolished the course record and made it look effortless. Sarah found herself the center of attention in the mess hall. Conversations stopped when she passed, and she could feel dozens of eyes following her movement. She selected a simple meal and looked for an empty table, hopping to eat in relative peace. "Martinez," a voice called out across the dining room. Sarah turned to see Jake Morrison approaching with his usual companions. Their earlier arrogance had been replaced by something that looked almost like respect, though skepticism remained in their expressions. "Mind if we join you?" Jake asked, gesturing to the empty chairs at her table. Sarah nodded toward the seats. "It's a free country." The 3 cadets sat down, creating an awkward silence as they seemed to struggle with how to begin the conversation. Finally, Marcus leaned forward. "Look, we owe you an apology for this morning. We made some assumptions that were clearly wrong." "Everyone makes assumptions," Sarah replied diplomatically. "No harm done." Tony was studying her carefully. "But we're curious. That performance on the course wasn't just good fitness. You moved like someone with serious training, military training. Sarah continued eating, considering her response. She had prepared for these questions, knowing that her physical capabilities would eventually draw attention. "I've done some martial arts and fitness competitions," she said, which was technically true, though it drastically understated her background. "I like to stay in shape." Jake wasn't buying the simple explanation. Martial arts and fitness competitions don't teach you to move like that. You climb that rope like you'd done it 1,000 times in full combat gear. The observation was more accurate than Jake realized. Sarah had indeed climbed similar ropes countless times, often while carrying 60 pounds of equipment and under hostile fire. "Maybe I'm just a natural athlete," she suggested with a slight smile. Before the conversation could continue further, Chief Petty Officer Williams approached their table. The dining room grew quieter as other cadets noticed the senior instructor's presence. "Martinez," he said formally, "the commander would like to see you in his office after you finish eating." Sarah nodded. "Of course, Chief, any idea what it's about?" Williams' expression was unreadable. "Just report to the administration building when you're done here." As the chief walked away, the three cadets exchanged glances. Being summoned to see the commander on your first day was unusual, especially after creating a stir with an unauthorized obstacle course run. "That can't be good," Tony said quietly. Sarah finished her meal without apparent concern. "I'm sure it's just routine paperwork, new transfer protocols, that sort of thing." But internally, she was calculating possibilities. Her cover identity was solid, backed by months of preparation and documentation. However, her performance that morning might have triggered security protocols designed to identify personnel with undisclosed special operations backgrounds. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself outside Commander Harris's office. The nameplate on the door read, "Commander Robert Harris, Facility Operations." She knocked twice and waited for permission to enter. "Come in," came the response from inside. Commander Harris was a lean man in his 50s with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone who had seen extensive combat service. His office walls displayed various commendations and photographs from different naval operations around the world. "Petty Officer Martinez," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Please have a seat." Sarah sat down and waited for the commander to speak. She noticed that her personnel file was open on his desk, though from her angle she couldn't see which documents were visible. "I understand you created quite a stir this morning," Harris began, his tone neutral. "I was invited to participate in what I was told was a facility tradition, sir. I didn't want to be rude." Harris allowed himself a slight smile. "Yes, I heard about the tradition. Those three cadets have been humbling new arrivals for months. I imagine this morning was educational for them." "I hope no one was offended by my performance, sir." "Offended? No. Curious? Absolutely." Harris leaned back in his chair and studied Sarah carefully. "See, Martinez, your file presents an interesting puzzle. According to your records, you've served admirably in various support roles for 8 years. Communications specialist, logistics coordinator, administrative assistant. All important jobs, but none that would typically develop the kind of physical capabilities you demonstrated today." Sarah maintained eye contact, her expression calm. "I've always taken physical fitness seriously, sir. I believe it's important for all military personnel to maintain high standards." "I agree completely," Harris said. "But there's a difference between good fitness and elite-level performance. What I saw on the security footage this morning looked like someone with advanced combat training." The mention of security footage wasn't unexpected. Military facilities monitored most areas for safety and security purposes. Sarah had assumed her run would be recorded. "I'm flattered by the assessment, sir, but I think you might be overestimating my abilities based on one obstacle course." Harris opened the file on his desk and read from it. 8 years of service, multiple commendations for excellence in communications and logistics support, clean disciplinary record, recommended for transfer by your previous commanding officer." He looked up at her. "But something doesn't add up." "Sir?" "Your previous commanding officer was Colonel James Thompson, correct?" "Yes, sir." "I served with Jim Thompson 15 years ago. Good man. So I called him this morning to get his personal assessment of your transfer to our facility." Sarah felt a slight tightening in her chest, but kept her expression neutral. This was a complication she hadn't anticipated. "What did Colonel Thompson say, sir?" "That's the interesting part. He said, and I quote, 'Sarah Martinez is one of the most capable soldiers I've ever had the privilege to serve with. You're lucky to have her.' Not the typical language for describing a communications specialist. Harris closed the file and leaned forward. Then he said something even more interesting. He said that if I had questions about your background, I should call a number at SOCOM headquarters. SOCOM? Special Operations Command. Sarah realized that her carefully constructed cover story was unraveling faster than she had expected. Colonel Thompson, her former handler, had apparently decided that maintaining complete secrecy wasn't worth the risk of her being misunderstood at her new assignment. "Sir, Harris held up a hand. "I made the call, Martinez. I spoke with a very polite gentleman who told me that your complete service record was classified above my clearance level, but that I was authorized to know that you had been assigned to my facility for a specific purpose." Sarah remained silent, waiting to see how much the commander had been told. "He also mentioned that you might be operating under a cover identity, and that I should provide you with whatever support you needed while maintaining operational security." The conversation had taken a turn Sarah hadn't planned for, but it wasn't necessarily problematic. Commander Harris obviously had a security clearance high enough to be read into sensitive operations, even if he couldn't access her complete records. "I understand this puts you in a difficult position, sir. Actually, it clarifies things considerably." Harris stood up and walked to his window, which overlooked the training areas. "This facility has been experiencing some security concerns lately. Equipment disappearing, unauthorized access to classified systems, intelligence reports that don't match the reality on the ground." Sarah processed this information. Her actual mission parameters were more complex than simple facility security, but this conversation suggested that her presence here served multiple purposes. "I'm here to help however I can, sir." "Good, because I have a feeling we're going to need your particular skill set." Harris returned to his desk and pulled out a different file. "These security incidents aren't random. Someone with inside knowledge and access is systematically compromising our operations. The question is who?" Sarah glanced at the file. "Do you have suspects?" "Several, but the perpetrator is careful and well-trained. Previous investigations have turned up nothing concrete." Harris looked at her directly. "I think it's going to take someone with your background to catch them." "I'll do whatever is necessary, sir." "Excellent. For now, continue your cover as a new transfer student. Participate in classes, follow the normal routine. But I want you to keep your eyes open and report anything unusual directly to me." Sarah nodded. "Understood, sir. Should I be concerned about maintaining my cover after this morning's display?" Harris considered this. "Actually, your performance might work in our favor. Everyone will be focused on your physical abilities and wondering about your background. That kind of obvious mystery can be perfect camouflage for your real purpose here." "How so, sir?" "People will assume they've figured you out, that you're some kind of former Special Forces operator trying to keep a low profile. They'll be so busy speculating about your military background that they won't consider other possibilities." It was an astute observation. Sometimes the best way to hide was indeed in plain sight, allowing people to think they had solved a mystery when they had actually only scratched the surface. "What about the cadets who challenged me this morning?" "Actually, they might be useful. Morrison, Chen, and Rodriguez are all capable students with good instincts. If you can gain their trust, they could provide valuable insights into the facility's social dynamics." Sarah thought about the three cadets. Jake Morrison's observation about her rope climbing technique had been uncomfortably accurate. These weren't simple-minded bullies. They were intelligent young officers who paid attention to details. "I'll work on building relationships with them and others." "Good, there's one more thing." Harris pulled out a communication device that looked like a standard military radio, but with additional encryption hardware. "This is a secure communicator. If you need to reach me outside normal channels, use frequency 77 alpha. The encryption is military grade." Sarah accepted the device and clipped it to her belt. "Is there a specific timeline for this investigation?" "The security breaches are escalating. 3 weeks ago, it was minor equipment theft. Last week, Someone accessed classified training schedules. 2 days ago, an encrypted hard drive containing operational intelligence went missing from a secured office. The timeline suggested that whoever was responsible was becoming bolder or more desperate. Either possibility indicated that the situation was approaching a critical point. I'll begin my assessment immediately. Be careful, Martinez. Whoever we're dealing with has demonstrated sophisticated operational security. They know how to move through this facility without being detected, and they have access to systems that should be highly restricted. Sarah stood up, recognizing that the briefing was concluded. I understand, sir. You can count on me. I know I can, dismissed. As Sarah left the commander's office, she reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed in the space of one conversation. Her cover as a simple transfer student was partially blown, but in a way that might actually benefit her mission. Commander Harris was clearly experienced enough to understand operational requirements, and having his support would make her job significantly easier. The challenge now would be balancing her investigation with maintaining enough of her cover to avoid spooking the target. Her morning performance on the obstacle course had already made her a person of interest among the facility's population. She needed to manage that attention carefully. As she walked back toward the residential areas, Sarah noticed Jake Morrison sitting alone on a bench near the training grounds. He was staring at the obstacle course with a thoughtful expression. She approached him. Mind if I sit down? Jake looked up, seeming surprised to see her. Sure, I was just thinking about this morning. Having regrets about the challenge. Not exactly regrets, more like questions. Jake turned to face her. Look, I've been at this facility for 2 years. I've seen hundreds of new recruits come through. None of them moved like you did today. Sarah sat down beside him. Maybe you haven't been looking hard enough. Or maybe you haven't been honest about your background. The directness of his statement caught Sarah slightly off guard. Jake Morrison was clearly more perceptive than his initial bravado had suggested. What do you think my background is? I think you're former Special Operations, probably Army Rangers or maybe Marine Force Recon. You did something that got you transferred here, and now you're trying to blend in with regular naval personnel. The theory was logical and largely accurate, though it missed the specific nature of her current mission. Sarah decided to neither confirm nor deny his suspicions. That's an interesting theory. It's the only theory that makes sense. The question is, why are you here? This facility doesn't typically get former Special Ops personnel unless there's a specific reason. Jake was definitely too perceptive for comfort. Sarah realized that gaining his trust might be more complicated than simply demonstrating competence. Maybe I just wanted a change of pace, she suggested. Maybe, or maybe there's something happening here that requires someone with your particular skills. Before Sarah could respond, Marcus and Tony appeared, having apparently been looking for Jake. They approached the bench with curious expressions. There you are, Marcus said to Jake. We've been looking everywhere for you, he nodded to Sarah. Martinez. We were just discussing this morning's events, Jake said. I was sharing my theory about our new friend's background. Tony sat down on the grass facing them. Let me guess, Special Forces. Something like that, Jake confirmed. Sarah realized that she was facing 3 intelligent young officers who were determined to solve the puzzle of her identity. Rather than continue deflecting their questions, she decided to try a different approach. Suppose your theory is correct, she said. What would that mean to you? The 3 cadets exchanged glances. Marcus spoke first. It would mean we made fools of ourselves this morning. It would mean you're here for a reason that has nothing to do with normal training, Tony added. Jake was more direct. It would mean that something is happening at this facility that requires special attention. Sarah studied their faces. These weren't typical cadets content to focus solely on their own training and advancement. They were observant, analytical, and clearly interested in the bigger picture. Hypothetically speaking, she said carefully, if someone with special training were assigned to this facility to address security concerns, what kind of assistance do you think local personnel could provide? Information, Jake said immediately. Someone from outside wouldn't know the facility's social dynamics, who has access to what, who can be trusted. Observation, Marcus added. Students see things that instructors miss. We're in dormitories, mess halls, informal gatherings where people let their guard down. Tony nodded. And we can move around the facility without attracting the same attention that a new instructor or staff member would. Sarah was impressed by their quick understanding of the implications. These three could indeed be valuable assets if they could be trusted. Those are all excellent points, she said. Hypothetically speaking, of course. Jake leaned forward. So hypothetically, if someone needed that kind of assistance, how would they go about arranging it? Sarah looked at each of them in turn. They were essentially volunteering to help with an investigation they had deduced might be happening. The question was whether she could trust them with even a partial version of the truth. Hypothetically, she said slowly, such an arrangement would require absolute discretion and a willingness to follow orders without asking too many questions. Understood, Marcus said immediately. We can handle that, Tony added. Jake was more thoughtful. What kind of risks would be involved, hypothetically? It was a good question, and showed that Jake was thinking like an officer rather than just an eager volunteer. Sarah appreciated the maturity of his approach. That would depend on the specific situation, she said, but any security investigation carries inherent risks. The four of them sat in silence for several moments, each considering the implications of the conversation. Finally, Jake spoke. If you decide you need assistance with anything, hypothetical or otherwise, you know where to find us. Sarah nodded. I'll keep that in mind. As the three cadets walked away, Sarah remained on the bench, watching the ongoing training activities around the facility. Her first day had been far more eventful than she had planned, but not necessarily in a bad way. Commander Harris was right. Her morning display had given her a kind of protective camouflage. People would be so focused on figuring out her obvious secrets that they might miss her real purpose. And she had potentially identified 3 intelligent allies who might prove invaluable to her investigation. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. Sarah Martinez had work to do, and now she had a clearer understanding of both the resources available to her and the obstacles she would need to overcome. Her real mission was just beginning. Sarah's second day at the facility began before dawn. Old habits from her special operations career made it impossible for her to sleep past 5 in the morning, and she used the quiet early hours to conduct reconnaissance of areas she hadn't yet explored. The facility was enormous, covering several square miles of coastal terrain. In addition to the main training areas and administrative buildings, there were specialized facilities for underwater operations, communications training, weapons instruction, and classified research projects that even her security clearance didn't cover. Moving silently through the pre-dawn darkness, Sarah mapped patrol routes, identified security camera positions, and noted which areas had restricted access. Her investigation would require understanding not just the human dynamics of the facility, but also its physical vulnerabilities. As the sun began to rise, she made her way to the mess hall for breakfast. The dining room was already bustling with early-rising cadets and instructors preparing for the day's activities. Sarah selected a table with a clear view of the room's entrances and began eating while observing the social patterns around her. Military facilities operated on strict hierarchies, but informal relationships often crossed rank boundaries. Understanding who talked to whom could provide valuable insights into how information and access might be compromised. "You're up early," a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see Chief Petty Officer Williams approaching with a coffee cup and a concerned expression. He sat down across from her without waiting for an invitation. "I've always been an early riser," Sarah replied. "It's a good time to think." Williams nodded. "Commander Harris mentioned that you two had a productive conversation yesterday." The chief's statement was carefully worded to acknowledge that he knew something about her situation without revealing specifics in a public setting. "Yes, we covered a lot of ground," Sarah said. "I'm looking forward to contributing to the facility's mission." "Good to hear. I've been here for 3 years, so if you need someone to show you around or answer questions about how things work, just let me know." Williams' offer was clearly more than simple courtesy. He was positioning himself as a potential asset for her investigation. Sarah appreciated the professionalism of his approach. I may take you up on that. I'm still learning the layout and the routines. It's a complex place, lots of moving parts, lots of people with different responsibilities and access levels. Williams sipped his coffee. Sometimes things fall through the cracks or end up where they shouldn't be. The comment was obviously a reference to the security breaches that had prompted her assignment here. Williams was letting her know that he was aware of the problems and ready to assist. Before Sarah could respond, Jake Morrison appeared at their table, followed by Marcus and Tony. The three cadets looked slightly nervous about approaching a table that included a chief petty officer. "Excuse me, Chief Martinez," Jake said formally. "We were wondering if we could have a word with Martinez when she's finished." Williams looked at the three cadets with amusement. "Relax, gentlemen, I don't bite in the morning. What's on your minds?" Marcus stepped forward. "We wanted to apologize again for yesterday's incident and offer to show Martinez around the facility, help her get oriented." It was a smooth way to request private time with Sarah while making it look like simple courtesy. Williams glanced at Sarah to gauge her response. "That's very thoughtful of you," Sarah said. "I could use some guidance from people who know the facility well." "Excellent idea," Williams agreed. "These three know every corner of this place. They can give you the kind of tour that isn't in the official orientation materials." After Williams left to attend to his duties, Sarah found herself walking with Jake, Marcus, and Tony toward the more remote areas of the facility. The morning air was crisp, and the sound of ocean waves provided background noise for their conversation. "So," Jake said once they were well away from other personnel, "we've been thinking about our conversation yesterday." "And we want to help," Marcus said bluntly. "If there's some kind of security problem here, we want to be part of the solution." Tony nodded in agreement. "This place has been good to us. We don't like the idea that someone might be compromising it." Sarah studied their faces. The offer seemed genuine, but she needed to be certain of their motivations and their ability to handle sensitive information. "What makes you think there's a security problem?" Jake looked around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "Equipment has been disappearing from the weapons training facility. At first, everyone assumed it was just poor inventory control, but the pattern is too consistent." "What kind of equipment?" Sarah asked. "Small stuff mostly. Night vision goggles, communication devices, specialized ammunition. Things that would be valuable on the black market or useful for intelligence gathering." Marcus picked up the explanation. "Then there are the computer system irregularities. Students have reported being logged out of training programs without explanation, and some people have found files in their accounts that they didn't create. Plus," Tony added, "there have been several incidents where classified training schedules were somehow leaked to unauthorized personnel. People showing up for exercises they weren't supposed to know about." Sarah was impressed by their observational skills. They had identified the same pattern of security breaches that had prompted her assignment, but from a student's perspective that revealed details she might not have discovered on her own. "These are serious concerns," she said carefully. "Have you reported them to facility leadership?" Jake shook his head. "We tried going through normal channels, filed reports, talked to our instructors, but nothing ever seemed to come of it. Either the incidents were dismissed as coincidence or the investigations went nowhere. That's when we started thinking that maybe the problem was more sophisticated than random theft or system glitches," Marcus explained. Tony stopped walking and turned to face Sarah directly. "Look, we know you're not just a regular transfer student. Yesterday proved that, and we know something brought you here. We want to help because we care about this place and the people in it." Sarah appreciated their directness. These three had demonstrated intelligence, observation skills, and genuine concern for the facility's security. More importantly, they had already identified many of the same issues she had been sent to investigate. "Suppose I was here to look into security problems," she said hypothetically. "What kind of assistance do you think would be most valuable?" Jake answered immediately. "Access. Students can go places and hear conversations that would be restricted for official investigators." "Information," Marcus added. "We know everyone here, their habits, their relationships, their financial situations. If someone is selling information or equipment, we might be able to identify who has both the access and the motivation." "And cover," Tony concluded. If you're conducting an investigation, you need a reason to be asking questions and spending time in different areas. Hanging out with students gives you natural cover for observing people and situations. Sarah was increasingly convinced that these three could be valuable assets. They understood operational requirements and had already proven their ability to think strategically about complex problems. All of that makes sense, she said. But working on something like this would involve real risks. If someone is conducting sophisticated security breaches, they won't hesitate to eliminate threats to their operation. We understand, Jake said soberly. But the risks of doing nothing might be even greater. If someone is compromising facility security, they're putting everyone here in danger. Sarah made her decision. These three had already figured out most of the situation on their own, and their offer of assistance could significantly enhance her investigation. All right, she said. Let's say you're right about there being security problems, and let's say I'm here to address them. If you're serious about helping, I'll need absolute discretion and complete willingness to follow orders without question. All three nodded immediately. Good, first rule, this conversation never happened. If anyone asks, you're simply showing me around and helping me get oriented. Understood, Marcus replied. Second rule, you don't take any independent action without clearing it with me first. I know you're all capable, but this kind of work requires careful coordination. Agreed, Tony said. Third rule, if I tell you to back off or step down from something, you do it immediately without argument. I have experience with this type of operation, and sometimes safety requires instant obedience. Jake nodded. We get it, you're in charge. Sarah looked at each of them in turn, then made her final assessment. All right, welcome to the team. The next hour was spent in detailed briefing, as Sarah shared what she could about the investigation without compromising classified aspects of her mission. The three cadets proved to be excellent students, asking thoughtful questions and offering valuable insights based on their knowledge of the facility. The pattern suggests we're looking for someone with extensive access and detailed knowledge of security procedures, Sarah explained. It's not just random opportunism, it's systematic intelligence gathering. That narrows the suspect pool considerably, Jake observed. Most students and even junior instructors wouldn't have access to the kind of systems that have been compromised. Marcus was thinking along different lines. But it could also be multiple people working together. One person with access providing information to someone else who handles the actual theft and data extraction. Good point, Sarah agreed. We need to consider both individual operators and organized groups. Tony had been studying a facility map while they talked. If I wanted to move stolen equipment off the facility without detection, I'd use the marine operations area. Boats come and go regularly for training exercises, and the loading docks have limited surveillance. Sarah was impressed by his tactical thinking. That's exactly the kind of analysis we need. You understand the facility's operational patterns better than an outside investigator ever could. So what's our first move? Jake asked. Sarah had been considering this question since deciding to trust them with the investigation. We need to establish regular patterns for observing key areas and personnel, but we have to do it in ways that look completely natural. I can handle the computer systems, Marcus volunteered. I'm taking advanced courses in communications and information technology. I have legitimate reasons to be around the server rooms and data centers. I can cover the weapons and equipment storage areas, Tony added. I'm cross-training in armory management, so I'm already in and out of those facilities regularly. Jake thought for a moment. I can focus on personnel. I know almost everyone here, and I'm good at getting people to talk. If someone is living beyond their means or showing signs of stress, I can probably identify them. Sarah nodded approvingly. Excellent division of responsibilities. Now we need to establish communication protocols and reporting procedures. She pulled out 3 small communication devices that looked like standard training equipment, but had been modified with secure encryption capabilities. These will allow us to stay in contact without using official channels. Frequency 99 Charlie, encryption code Delta 77. The cadets accepted the devices and quickly familiarized themselves with the controls. Their military training made the technology easy for them to understand and operate. Remember, Sarah emphasized, we're looking for patterns, unusual behavior, and opportunities. Don't try to confront anyone or gather evidence directly. Observe and report. What if we see something happening in real time? Tony asked. You contact me immediately and then get to safety. Don't try to be heroes. Professional criminals won't hesitate to hurt people who get in their way. As they prepared to separate and begin their individual assignments, Jake had one final question. How long do you think this investigation will take? Sarah considered the complexity of what they were dealing with. That depends on how careful our targets are and how lucky we get with our observations. Could be days, could be weeks. But based on the escalating pattern of incidents, I don't think we have unlimited time. The four of them split up, each heading toward their assigned areas of responsibility. Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction at having assembled a capable team so quickly, but also awareness that the real work was just beginning. Her first priority was to establish her own observation posts and intelligence-gathering routines. The facility's administration building contained personnel files, security reports, and access logs that could provide valuable insights into the investigation. As a new transfer student, she had legitimate reasons to spend time there handling paperwork and orientation requirements. Sarah made her way toward the administration building, mentally preparing for several hours of careful research into the facility's personnel and recent security incidents. The morning's conversation with Jake, Marcus, and Tony had given her valuable information, but it had also confirmed her suspicions that the security breaches represented a sophisticated and ongoing operation. Someone at this facility was systematically compromising security for profit or ideology. Sarah Martinez was here to identify them and put a stop to their activities. With her new team in place and her investigation officially beginning, she was ready to start hunting. The game was on, and Sarah intended to win. 3 days into the investigation, Sarah's team had established effective surveillance routines and begun identifying suspicious patterns. The administration building had provided her with access to personnel files and incident reports that revealed disturbing trends in the facility's security breaches. Sarah was reviewing encrypted communications from her team when her secure radio crackled to life. It was Marcus, reporting from the Information Technology Center. "Base, this is Tech," he said, using the code names they had established. "I've got something interesting here." "Go ahead, Tech." "I'm in the server room running diagnostics, and I found unauthorized access logs from 3 nights ago. Someone was in the classified systems between midnight and 2 a.m. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Any identification on who accessed the systems? That's the weird part. The access was logged under Chief Instructor Davidson's credentials, but I checked with the duty roster. Davidson was signed out on leave that entire weekend. Chief Instructor Davidson was a 20-year veteran with an impeccable record and top-secret clearance. If someone was using his credentials for unauthorized access, it represented a serious compromise of facility security. Good work, Tech. Can you determine what systems were accessed without triggering any alerts? I think so. Give me another hour to trace the activity logs. Sarah switched frequencies and contacted Tony, who was monitoring the weapons storage areas. Armory, this is Base. Status report. Base, I've got movement to report. Lieutenant Foster made 3 separate visits to the advanced equipment storage yesterday, which is unusual for his normal duties. Each visit lasted less than 10 minutes. Lieutenant Foster was an instructor in electronic warfare systems, not someone who would typically need regular access to weapons storage. The pattern Marcus had identified was definitely worth investigating. Did you observe what he removed or accessed? Negative, but I noticed he's been carrying a larger equipment bag lately, and yesterday I saw him loading something into his personal vehicle after the 3rd storage visit. Sarah made notes on both reports. The investigation was starting to reveal a network of suspicious activities that seemed too coordinated to be coincidental. Her radio crackled again. This time it was Jake reporting from his personnel surveillance assignment. Base, this is Observer. I need to meet with you privately. I've found something that can't be discussed over radio. The urgency in Jake's voice suggested he had discovered something significant. Sarah arranged to meet him at a maintenance shed near the vehicle depot where they could talk without being overheard. 20 minutes later, Jake arrived looking troubled and carrying a folder of documents. "What did you find?" Sarah asked immediately. Jake opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. "I've been monitoring personnel behavior like you asked, looking for signs of stress or financial problems. Lieutenant Foster has been acting strange lately, nervous, jumpy, avoiding social interactions. Tony reported that Foster has been making unusual visits to weapons storage. That's not all. I started following him discreetly yesterday evening, and he met with someone off the facility grounds." Jake handed Sarah one of the photographs. This was taken with a long lens from about 200 meters away. The photograph showed Lieutenant Foster sitting in a car with another man. The quality wasn't perfect, but Sarah could see that money was being exchanged between the two individuals. "Did you identify the other person?" "I couldn't get a clear shot of his face, but I got his license plate number. The car is registered to Robert Chen, no relation to Marcus, as far as I can tell." Sarah studied the photograph carefully. Lieutenant Foster appeared to be receiving an envelope from the other man while placing a small package on the seat between them. "How long did the meeting last?" "About 10 minutes. Foster left first, and the other guy waited another 5 minutes before driving away." Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. Foster's unusual access to weapons storage, combined with his secret meeting and apparent payment, suggested he was the inside source they had been looking for. "Excellent work, Observer. This could be the break we needed." Jake nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "There's something else. While I was following Foster, I noticed another car in the area that seemed to be conducting surveillance. I think someone else is watching him too." This was an unexpected complication. If another party was already investigating Foster, it could interfere with their own operation or indicate a larger conspiracy. "Did you get any information about the other surveillance?" "Not much. Dark sedan, 2 occupants, professional equipment. They were good, I almost missed them entirely." Sarah considered the implications. The other surveillance could be federal investigators, foreign intelligence, or even criminal associates monitoring Foster's activities. "We need to accelerate our timeline. If multiple parties are interested in Foster, the situation could become unstable quickly." Sarah activated her secure communicator and contacted Commander Harris. "Sir, this is Martinez. I need to brief you on significant developments in our investigation." "Copy that. My office in 30 minutes." Before leaving to meet with the commander, Sarah gathered Marcus and Tony to coordinate their next moves. The maintenance shed provided adequate privacy for a team conference. "Tech, what did your further analysis of the server access reveal?" Marcus pulled out his tablet computer. "Whoever used Davidson's credentials accessed 3 different classified databases: personnel files for all facility staff, training schedules for the next month, and something called Project Neptune." Sarah had never heard of Project Neptune, but the fact that someone had specifically targeted it suggested considerable intelligence value. "Armory, I need you to maintain close surveillance on Foster without being detected. If he makes any more visits to storage areas, I want real-time notification." "Understood. What about his meeting schedule? Should I try to follow him off the facility again?" "Negative. That's too risky if there are multiple surveillance teams operating. Observer will handle any off-site monitoring." Jake nodded his agreement. "I can maintain distant surveillance without compromising the operation." Sarah looked at each of her team members. "This investigation has reached a critical phase. Foster appears to be our primary target, but there are complications we didn't anticipate. Everyone needs to be extremely careful and maintain constant communication." "What kind of complications?" Marcus asked. "Other parties are investigating Foster independently. We don't know who they are or what their objectives might be." Tony frowned. "Could be federal law enforcement." "Possibly. Or it could be foreign intelligence services, criminal associates, or corporate competitors. Until we know more, we have to assume that everyone except us represents a potential threat." The 3 cadets absorbed this information soberly. What had started as a facility security investigation was apparently connected to larger issues that could involve national security. "Observer, I want you to research Robert Chen, the man Foster met with. Use official channels, but be subtle about it. Find out who he is, what his background looks like, and whether he has any criminal or intelligence connections. Copy that. Tech, I need you to find out everything you can about Project Neptune without triggering security alerts. If Foster specifically targeted that database, it's probably the key to understanding what he's selling. I'll be careful but thorough. Armory, expand your surveillance to include all the storage areas Foster has accessed. Look for patterns in what's missing and when the thefts occurred. Roger. Sarah gathered her equipment and prepared to brief Commander Harris. I'll be back in contact within 2 hours. Until then, maintain your surveillance but don't take any risks. If Foster or anyone else becomes suspicious, back off immediately. As Sarah walked toward the administration building, she reflected on how quickly the investigation had evolved. What had begun as a routine security inquiry was revealing connections to outside criminal organizations and classified projects she had never heard of. Commander Harris listened intently as Sarah briefed him on the team's discoveries. His expression grew increasingly serious as she described Foster's activities and the evidence of outside surveillance. Project Neptune is a classified research initiative, he explained when she finished. It involves advanced underwater surveillance technologies that could be extremely valuable to foreign intelligence services or military contractors. So Foster isn't just stealing equipment for profit, he's conducting industrial espionage. Or worse, if this technology falls into the wrong hands, it could compromise naval operations worldwide. Harris activated his secure terminal and began accessing classified databases. Lieutenant Foster has been with us for 18 months. His background check was clean, but that was before he had access to Neptune materials. Sir, we need to consider the possibility that Foster isn't working alone. The sophistication of his access to classified systems suggests he has help from someone with advanced technical skills. Agreed. I'm going to authorize you to use whatever resources you need to resolve this situation quickly. If Foster is planning to transfer Neptune data, we can't allow that to happen. Sarah nodded. I'd like to request backup from SOCOM. This operation may require capabilities beyond what my current team can provide. Already arranged. A tactical support team will arrive tonight under cover as new transfer personnel. They'll report directly to you. The commander's quick response indicated that the situation was even more serious than Sarah had initially understood. Project Neptune was apparently critical enough to warrant immediate special operations intervention. Sir, what are my rules of engagement regarding Foster and any associates? Harris was quiet for several moments before responding. Your primary objective is to prevent the transfer of Neptune data and recover any materials that have already been compromised. Secondary objective is to identify and neutralize the entire network involved in the espionage operation. Understood. What about the other surveillance team that Observer identified? Unknown at this time. Could be federal law enforcement, but we haven't been notified of any parallel investigations. Treat them as potentially hostile until their identity and objectives are confirmed. Sarah left Commander Harris's office with a much clearer understanding of the stakes involved. Lieutenant Foster wasn't just a corrupt officer stealing equipment. He was potentially compromising national security by selling advanced military technology to foreign interests. As she walked back toward the training areas, Sarah's secure communicator activated with an urgent message from Tony. Base, this is Armory. Foster is moving. He's loaded a large case into his vehicle and is heading toward the main gate. Copy that, Armory. Maintain surveillance but keep your distance. Sarah switched frequencies and contacted Jake. Observer, Foster is mobile. Can you intercept and follow without being detected? Already on it, Base. I'm 3 vehicles behind him heading south on the coastal highway. The investigation was moving into its active phase. Within the next few hours, Sarah expected to learn whether Lieutenant Foster was simply stealing equipment for profit or conducting a much more serious espionage operation against vital national security interests. Either way, Sarah Martinez was ready to stop him. Jake's voice came through the secure communicator with controlled urgency. Base, Foster has arrived at the marina 15 miles south of the facility. He's meeting with the same individual from yesterday, plus 2 additional people I don't recognize. Sarah was already moving toward her vehicle, having anticipated that Foster's departure might lead to an immediate exchange of stolen materials. Can you observe the meeting without being detected? Affirmative. I'm positioned about 200 meters away with clear sight lines. Foster has opened the case he brought from the facility. Describe what you see. Multiple electronic devices, what looks like hard drives or data storage equipment, and several items I can't identify from this distance. The new people appear to be examining everything very carefully. Sarah started her vehicle and began driving toward the marina. Observer, I'm en route to your location. Maintain surveillance but do not intervene regardless of what happens. Copy that, base. Sarah switched frequencies and contacted Marcus. Tech, I need you to access security footage from the marina location. See if you can identify the vehicles and people Foster is meeting with. Working on it now, base. The marina has a private security system, but I can tap into their network remotely. As Sarah drove south along the coastal highway, she contacted Commander Harris to update him on the developing situation. Sir, Foster has left the facility with what appears to be stolen classified materials and is conducting a handoff at a marina south of our location. Copy that. The SOCOM tactical team is standing by for immediate deployment if needed. Do you require backup? Sarah considered the tactical situation. 4 people at a marina location could be manageable for a single operator, but the presence of unknown surveillance teams complicated the scenario significantly. Sir, I recommend having the tactical team move to a staging position nearby, but remain out of sight unless I specifically request intervention. Understood. They'll be airborne in 5 minutes and can reach your location within 15 minutes of your call. Sarah felt a familiar sense of calm focus settling over her as the situation transitioned from investigation to direct action. This was the environment where her special operations training was most valuable, fluid situations requiring quick decisions and precise execution. Her communicator activated again with an update from Marcus. Base, I've accessed the marina security system. I count 4 vehicles in the parking area, including Foster's. One of the additional vehicles has diplomatic plates. Diplomatic plates suggested foreign intelligence involvement, confirming Sarah's suspicions that this was more than simple criminal activity. Can you identify which country? The plates are registered to the Embassy of Voronova. That's a small Eastern European nation that's been flagged for intelligence activities against U.S. military technology. Sarah's assessment of the threat level increased significantly. If Foster was selling Project Neptune technology to foreign intelligence services, the national security implications were enormous. Tech, I need you to begin documenting everything you can observe through the security cameras. We'll need evidence for prosecution and to assess how much classified material has been compromised. Already recording everything. I've got clear footage of Foster handing over materials to what appear to be foreign operatives. As Sarah approached the marina area, Jake's voice returned to her communicator. Base, the meeting appears to be concluding. Foster has received what looks like a significant cash payment, and the foreign operatives are loading the materials into their vehicle. Any sign of the other surveillance team you identified yesterday? Negative. If they're here, they're being more careful than I can detect. Sarah parked her vehicle in a position that provided multiple escape routes while maintaining visual contact with the marina parking area. Through her binoculars, she could see Foster shaking hands with 3 men in expensive suits who clearly weren't American military personnel. Her secure communicator crackled with an encrypted message from Commander Harris. Martinez, we've just received intelligence that suggests this operation may be larger than anticipated. Foster appears to be part of an established network that has been targeting multiple military facilities. Understood, sir. Are you authorizing immediate action to prevent the transfer of materials? Affirmative. Prevent the transfer by any means necessary, but try to take Foster alive for interrogation. We need to understand the full scope of the compromise. Sarah assessed her tactical options. 4 targets in an open area with limited cover, plus unknown surveillance elements that could complicate the situation. She had trained for similar scenarios countless times, but each operation presented unique challenges. Observer, I need you to move to a position where you can block the marina exit road if necessary. Don't engage unless I specifically order it. Copy that, base. Moving into position now. Sarah activated her tactical equipment and began approaching the marina on foot, using parked vehicles and marina structures for concealment. Her objective was to get close enough to prevent the foreign operatives from leaving with the stolen materials while maintaining the option to capture Foster for interrogation. As she moved closer to the target area, Sarah could hear fragments of conversation between Foster and the foreign operatives. They were speaking in English, but with accents that confirmed Marcus's identification of Eastern European involvement. "The technology specifications are exactly what we discussed," one of the operatives was saying. "Your access to the Neptune project has been extremely valuable." Foster's response revealed the extent of his betrayal. "I can provide updated technical data every month as long as the payments continue. There are other projects at the facility that might interest your government as well." Sarah realized that Foster wasn't conducting a one-time sale. He was offering to become a long-term intelligence asset for a foreign government. The national security implications were staggering. Her communicator vibrated with a text message from Marcus. "Base, additional vehicles approaching marina from north. Unknown number of occupants." Sarah's tactical situation was about to become significantly more complex. She activated her emergency frequency and contacted the SOCOM tactical team. "Overwatch, this is Martinez. I need immediate backup at my location. Multiple foreign operatives, stolen classified materials, and additional unknown elements approaching." "Copy that, Martinez. Tactical team is 2 minutes from your position." Sarah made her decision. Rather than wait for backup and risk the foreign operatives escaping with Project Neptune technology, she would initiate contact immediately and improvise based on their response. She stepped out from behind a parked vehicle with her weapon drawn, but pointed at the ground in a non-threatening position. "Lieutenant Foster, I'm placing you under arrest for espionage and theft of classified materials." The 4 men spun around in surprise, clearly not having expected to be confronted during their clandestine meeting. Foster's face went white as he recognized Sarah from the facility. "Martinez, how did you?" he began, then stopped as realization dawned. "You're not just a transfer student, are you?" "No, Lieutenant, I'm not." Sarah kept her voice calm and professional. "Gentlemen, I'm going to need you to step away from the vehicle and place your hands where I can see them." The 3 foreign operatives exchanged glances, clearly calculating their options. One of them, apparently the leader, spoke with controlled authority. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. We have diplomatic immunity, and this meeting is protected under international law." "Diplomatic immunity doesn't cover espionage activities," Sarah replied. "And I'm not particularly concerned about international law when it comes to protecting classified U.S. military technology." The sound of approaching helicopter rotors began to fill the air as the SOCOM tactical team approached the marina. Sarah could also hear vehicle engines from the direction Marcus had indicated, suggesting that the additional unknown elements were about to arrive. Foster looked around desperately, clearly realizing that his espionage operation had been thoroughly compromised. "Look, Martinez, maybe we can work something out. I can provide information about other people involved in this." "That's exactly what you're going to do, Lieutenant, after you're in custody." The foreign operative who had been speaking earlier reached slowly into his jacket, prompting Sarah to raise her weapon to a ready position. "I wouldn't recommend that," she said calmly. "Whatever you're reaching for is less effective than the tactical team that's about to land behind you." As if on cue, the SOCOM helicopter descended toward the marina parking area, and 4 heavily armed operators fast-roped to the ground. Their arrival dramatically shifted the tactical balance in Sarah's favor. The foreign operatives realized their situation had become untenable. The leader raised his hands slowly and spoke in a controlled voice. "We invoke diplomatic protection and demand immediate contact with our embassy." "You can invoke whatever you want," Sarah replied, "but those stolen materials aren't leaving this marina." Jake's voice came through her earpiece with an urgent update. "Base, the additional vehicles are federal agents, FBI and what looks like Naval Criminal Investigative Service. They're setting up a perimeter around the marina." The situation was rapidly becoming a multi-agency operation. which would complicate Sarah's mission parameters, but also provide additional resources for handling the foreign operatives and conducting a thorough investigation. Over the next hour, the marina became a controlled chaos of federal agents, military personnel, and diplomatic officials. Foster was taken into custody by NCIS agents, while the foreign operatives were detained pending diplomatic negotiations. The stolen Project Neptune materials were recovered and secured for analysis. Sarah found herself debriefing multiple agencies about the investigation that had led to uncovering the espionage operation. Her cover as a transfer student was completely blown, but the successful prevention of classified technology transfer more than justified the compromise. Commander Harris arrived at the scene to coordinate with the federal agencies and assess the damage to facility security. He pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. Outstanding work, Martinez. The materials Foster stole could have compromised naval operations for decades if they had reached foreign intelligence services. Thank you, sir. What's the assessment of how much damage was done before we stopped the operation? Still being evaluated, but it appears Foster's access was more recent than we initially thought. Most of the critical Neptune technology was protected, though we'll need to assume that some preliminary data was compromised. Sarah nodded. What about the cadets who assisted in the investigation? Morrison, Chen, and Rodriguez provided crucial intelligence that made this operation possible. They'll be commended for their contribution and offered opportunities to transfer to intelligence or investigative specialties if they're interested. Their performance was exceptional. As the federal agents completed their processing of the crime scene, Sarah reflected on how dramatically the situation had evolved from her first day at the facility. What had begun as cadets trying to intimidate a new recruit had become a complex counterintelligence operation that prevented serious damage to national security. Jake, Marcus, and Tony approached her as she was preparing to leave the marina with Commander Harris. Martinez, Jake said formally, we wanted to thank you for trusting us to be part of this operation. You proved yourselves worthy of that trust, Sarah replied. Your observation skills and dedication to facility security were essential to the mission's success. Marcus looked curious. Can you tell us who you really are? I mean, obviously you're not just a communications specialist. Sarah smiled slightly. Let's just say that the Navy occasionally needs people with specialized skills to handle unusual situations. Lieutenant Foster's espionage operation qualified as unusual. Tony grinned. So you're some kind of secret agent. I'm someone who takes protecting classified military technology very seriously, Sarah said diplomatically. And you three proved that you share that commitment. As they drove back toward the facility, Commander Harris briefed Sarah on her next assignment. You'll be staying here for another month to help assess facility security and implement improvements based on what we learned from Foster's operation. Copy that, sir. I assume my cover as a transfer student is no longer viable. Actually, we're going to transition you to an official role as a security consultant. It will allow you to operate openly while maintaining some operational flexibility. Sarah was satisfied with the arrangement. The facility had proven to be an interesting assignment with capable personnel who took their responsibilities seriously. Her first impression of Jake, Marcus, and Tony as simple bullies had been completely wrong. They were dedicated young officers who had the potential for significant contributions to military intelligence and security operations. As they reached the facility gates, Sarah reflected on the events of the past week. She had successfully completed her primary mission of identifying and stopping the security breaches, but more importantly, she had discovered that the facility's personnel were far more capable and trustworthy than anyone had anticipated. Lieutenant Foster's betrayal had been stopped before it could cause irreparable damage to national security. The three cadets who had initially tried to intimidate her had proven to be valuable allies with strong potential for future intelligence work. And Sarah had once again demonstrated that the most effective operations often required building trust with local personnel who understood the environment better than any outside investigator. The facility would be more secure going forward. The stolen technology had been recovered, and a dangerous espionage network had been disrupted. For Sarah Martinez, it had been a successful mission that reminded her why she had chosen a career in special operations. Some battles were won through force and firepower, but others required intelligence, patience, and the ability to recognize allies in unexpected places. This operation had been the latter type, and Sarah was proud of how it had concluded. As she settled into her quarters for what might be her last night at the facility, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new missions, but tonight, she could rest knowing that she had protected vital national security interests and discovered that even the most routine assignments could reveal extraordinary people. The cadets who had tried to ambush her with an obstacle course challenge had become trusted partners in a counterintelligence operation. It was, Sarah reflected, exactly the kind of unexpected development that made her career endlessly interesting.